Hello and welcome to Evil Economics, where we investigate the methods and deceptive techniques used by fraudsters to separate you from your hard-earned wealth. This week we are covering the HealthSouth Fraud, a scandal so audacious its ramifications were felt in all 50 states. The company's CEO and founder, Richard Scrushy, was at the heart of the scheme, which would turn HealthSouth into one of the largest healthcare companies in the United States. But behind the veil of Scrushy's deception, the company was hiding over $2.7 billion in inflated earnings. How was he able to pull this off? With an army of accountants willing to cook the books in order to inflate revenues and mask companies' expenses. HealthSouth is the perfect example of profits over people and greed overriding ethics. To find out how this scheme went down, stay tuned. And don't forget to hit that bell and subscribe icon. This is the evil economics of HealthSouth. HealthSouth was founded in 1984 by Richard Scrushy with a single outpatient center in Birmingham, Alabama. The company specialized in rehabilitative care, such as physical therapy and occupational therapy for patients recovering from surgeries, strokes, and other injuries. The company would grow quickly and in just 2 short years would begin to be traded publicly. By the time 1987 rolled around, the company was expanding into workers' compensation and sports medicine, effectively doubling their profits and bringing the HealthSouth assets to over $100 million. The early 90s would see the company expand even further. Under Scrushy's leadership, HealthSouth would develop facilities in all 50 states and saw company revenues exceed $181 million. HealthSouth received international attention when it brought on star athletes, including American football and baseball player Bo Jackson, who would serve as the president of HealthSouth's Sports Medicine Council. Other celebrity athletes would include Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal. Throughout the 1990s, HealthSouth would continue to expand and eventually would become the largest comprehensive rehabilitative service in the United States. Top company officials made quarterly reviews of financial results and compared them to market expectations. If they were short, as was oftentimes the case, company officials were told to manipulate the results or fill the gap. This involved accounting staff making false entries to inflate assets, income, and false documents were also created to give provenance to these entries. Since it was known that auditors would automatically inspect any transaction over $5,000, the fraudulent transactions would be limited to between $500 and $4,999 to avoid detection. To give context to the scale of the fraud taking place, consider this. In order to cover the $2.7 billion mentioned earlier, assuming that the average fraudulent entry was for $2,500, over 1 million fraudulent entries and supporting documents had to be created in order for this scandal to continue. In 1998, Medicare changed its funding arrangements to reduce exploitation and payments by over $100 billion. In spite of Scrushy's insistence that it would not affect their bottom line, profits dropped by 93% and the fraud was ramped up. Around this time, an investigation by the insurance company Blue Cross Blue Shield determined that HealthSouth was improperly billing Medicare for therapy by students, interns, and other unlicensed aides. The SEC would eventually file a lawsuit as the claims began to pile up, and HealthSouth would agree to settle out of court for $325 million. The company and Scrushy wouldn't find themselves in any real trouble until 2002. When Scrushy sold over $75 million in stock, days before the company posted a big loss and prompted the Security and Exchange Commission, or SEC, to initiate an investigation. The company hired an outside law firm who concluded that the sale of the stock and the profit loss were unrelated. However, this did not clear the company off SEC radar. During the course of the investigation, William Owens, who was the acting company's chief financial officer, or CFO, would become a whistleblower and attempted to get Scrushy to speak about the fraud while he was wearing a wire, but failed. As the scope of the fraud was uncovered, multiple CFOs and accountants who worked for HealthSouth would come forward to testify under oath that Scrushy was the ringleader and that he directed the massive fraud himself. However, no material evidence was ever recovered or presented in the trial directly tying Scrushy to the fraud. Richard M. Scrushy would be the first person in history to be charged under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a law passed requiring enhanced financial information disclosure for publicly traded companies. Even though a plethora of current and former HealthSouth employees testified against Scrushy, saying he used a mix of intimidation, threats, and cash payments to persuade top executives into committing fraud, he would end up being acquitted on all charges. The lack of any hard evidence, along with Scrushy's humble origins, with him having grown up in a small town and lived much of his life in trailer parks, Scrushy's story resonated with the impoverished Birmingham community and jury who saw him not as a spoiled rich kid adding to his parents' millions, but as one of their own, who rose out of poverty only to fall on hard times. The same luck, however, would not be seen by the accounting staff, who Scrushy's legal team would direct the blame towards, and whose signatures were on the fraudulent financial documents. William Owens, who was mentioned earlier, was sentenced to 5 years in prison despite his cooperation. Other CFOs who received notable sentences included Aaron Beam, who served 3 months, and Weston Smith, who received 27 months. Scrushy was charged a few months later with bribing the governor of Alabama to get on the review board that approved the construction of new hospitals in Alabama, citing 2 disclosed payments equaling $500,000 Scrushy made to the governor. Scrushy's legal team claimed that the transaction was through a political action committee registered with the Secretary of State and that nothing was sought in exchange. They went on to claim that the second case taking place in Montgomery was in retribution for the failed Birmingham trial. The jury this time, however, found Scrushy guilty on 3 counts: bribery, conspiracy, and mail fraud. Scrushy was sentenced to 6 years and 10 months in prison, while Governor Don Siegelman, who he was bribing, was sentenced to 7 years and 4 months. Pension funds, retirement accounts, and individual stockholders lost billions when the fraud was exposed, and HealthSouth stock prices plummeted. Employees who had invested in stock options as part of their compensation saw their financial futures ruined overnight. In 2009, these constituents would bring Scrushy to civil court over the charges he was acquitted on and would be awarded $2.87 billion in restitutions. The Judge Horn, who presided over the case, stated Scrushy knew of and participated in the fraud. In 2012, Scrushy would be released from prison, and he has been living quietly ever since. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video presentation from Evil Economics. We hope that you enjoyed it, and if there's an individual, corporation, or scandal that you'd like us to cover in a future episode, let us know in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next one.